Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the APU session on the FinTech theme. And whenever we talk about FinTech, it's one of the most anticipated segment of the financial services industry at the moment. A lot of transformation is happening across every segment of the business, but finance and accounting is one of the area which is going through a rapid transformation on a daily basis, in fact. And we can see those changes happening, and that takes us to a lot of thinking about how the role of the future finance graduate will look like, how the industry will be shaping, and what are the requirements for the industry from the fresh graduates who are going to graduate from the accounting and finance discipline. And thinking about that, who will be the best person to talk about? A person who has worked in the big four, both in Deloitte and EY, will be talking to us on that theme. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gopal Kiran, who is the Director of Financial Services at Deloitte, based in Malaysia. Before joining Deloitte, Mr. Gopal was the ASEAN FinTech leader with EY, and that's why you can see that he carries a abundance of experience talking about FinTech in the region with both EY and Deloitte. Mr. Gopal has a MBA from USA Hult International Business School with the engineering background. And most of his work in the fintech include in the area of digital banking, market entry strategy for European fintech to ASEAN, fintech funding, fintech collaboration, digital channel strategy and implementation, cashless economy, neo banking license application, RegTech, product innovation, InsurTech. You'd ask about it, Mr. Gopal has worked across all the segment of the fintech. In fact, Mr. Gopal has given talks and presented on fintech forum, more than 350 plus fintech forums. So he carries a huge amount of experience in this area, and we are so much privileged and honored to have him this morning with us to talk about what are the changes going to happen in the fintech segment and how does it impact the employment opportunities for that. With that, Mr. Gopal, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Dr. Nafis, for the introduction. I think it's always great to be back at universities and speak to the university students. I've always excited to be a student every time in my career. So with that introduction, I think I will quickly share some of my insights on what we see, where is the digital and the fintech innovation that is currently happening in the Southeast Asia region and in Malaysia. Hope you can see my screen. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session. I will take some 10-15 minutes of my time to quickly share some of the insights of what we see the state of fintech innovation in ASEAN. Um, to be very honest with you, I think this whole the fintech bug, or what you call the excitement, that came to me some 5 to 6 years back, and the journey I went through in the after I've got this the new thing. It really changed the way how I pursue things and how I've got industry collaboration connection. So it changed the whole spectrum of the things I used to do at my current work. So moving to the second part of the slide, I'm trying to move once again. So I cannot move the slide now, Professor. Yeah. So sorry for that. So what we see precisely in ASEAN markets is there is a emerging trend that is happening with respect to the change and transformation for many of the financial services players. The reason why ASEAN became a hotbed for fintech, I think you might be very well aware. Like there's a lot of young millennial savvy population that is getting population in ASEAN markets. And if you look at the penetration of some of the digital tools like smartphone penetration, internet penetration, that are getting very high in Malaysia and so as in the region. And then SMEs are trying to move towards digitization. That's another area. And then there's an increasing urban and literate and young population. That's another reason. These are some of these trends we see where why there is a lot of interest for fintech in the ASEAN region. If you look at the last few years, the kind of investment that is happening in the fintech across the globe, I think Asia Pacific or ASEAN markets is getting very interesting. The kind of investments used to happen in US and Europe, they're continuously shifting towards the ASEAN market because of some of the favorable factors which we are seeing in the fintech. So I think I assume I don't need to introduce to the students here of what the definitions of fintech and what are the areas of fintech. I assume you're well versed there. But globally, many of the VCs or the investment funds, they are quite bullish on the ASEAN markets. That's why every other day you will see there is an investment happening in the Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore by default, Indonesia for other areas. So there's a lot of traction happening in the fintech and the digital financial services space. So just to emphasize the methodology or the theory behind why I say digital and fintech is on the snapshot on the limelight in the ASEAN is based on some of the stats you can see here. If you look at the total population of the ASEAN, comes to around some 647 million. If you look at the urbanization of the ASEAN, it's around coming to 48 to 50 kind of a ratio. And then if you look at the internet penetration rate is increasing at 53% in the ASEAN market. That is a very good sign to push some of the financial services to digital as a channel, or fintech as an enabler to reach to achieve financial inclusion and send some of the financial services to the unserved or underserved segments. And I think many of you are contributing to this factor here on the active social media users. So this is an interesting stat we see. It is increasing around 47% in the ASEAN market, which is quite high. In fact, there are some interesting stats like in Malaysia, the number of smartphone devices owned by an individual is around 3 devices. So that could be your laptop, that could be your a smartphone, or your iPad, or a smartwatch or something. So it is the three is the average devices. And there are some other stats with respect to Malaysia. We say the average amount of time spent on internet and social media is coming around some 13.8 hours, so an approximate 13 to 14 hours kind of a thing in a day. So that is like half a day we have been associated with all this internet and the smart devices, which clearly explains why we see a lot of traction in the region. So Moving on, I think specifically if we talk of fintech, there are multiple sub areas within the fintech space that are getting disrupted very heavily. I think being some of the students from banking and accounting and some other areas from the university, I think many of these words might resonate well with you. So if you look at from the ASEAN perspective, there are two areas that are getting disrupted very heavily. One is on the payments and the second is on the lending. You can see from the screen. So around 60% of the fintech companies that come in the ASEAN region belong to either a payments or lending. What I mean by payments is the e-wallet players, all your cross-border payments. These are some of the um, areas where we're looking at the payments. Lending is mostly on peer-to-peer lending, on digital lending marketplaces. This is what we look at on the lending side. So apart from that, the other interesting areas where we see there's a lot of disruption happening is on with respect to wealth and asset management. You might have heard a lot of robo advisors. A robo advisor meaning it's not a real robo, but a digital tool which will help you to guide on your wealth management or your personal finance management. So that is getting interesting. Chatbots, I think many of the players in the ASEAN region, the banks, insurance companies are looking at chatbot for their customer service or the sales or marketing. So this is one area where we are getting seeing a lot of traction. Marketplace, like for example, Indonesia, it is getting very popular with respect to a lot of marketplace where you connect the buyers and sellers and other ecosystem partners as a part of one uh, tool or a platform. This is the marketplace. And then if you look at the insurtech, I think this is one area that is getting highly disrupted with respect to the insurance, both on the life insurance and the general insurance, be it Takaful and Retakaful. Uh, how do you use emerging technologies to do customer onboarding, or how do you do emerging technologies to do underwriting, reduce claims, or do fraud assessment within the claims? So these are some of the interesting areas. And then the other technologies you might have heard, artificial intelligence has been like it's a key enabler in the chatbot kind of a technology. Drones are getting very interesting in the financial services space. What I hear sitting in Malaysia, what's happening in Europe is some of the financial entity players, they are trying to use drones to deliver the credit cards or some of the PIN emailers. Some kind of a financial services use cases have been experimented or prototypes using drones. In fact, drones have been used extensively in insurance space as well for claim assessment or an accident assessment. Instead of a person going to the site place, a drone will go take pictures and then send to the processing center for processing your claim. So these are some of the interesting things we see. For example, KYC. I think if you talk of digital and fintech, I think there are two fundamental areas which the financial institutions need infusion of technology. One is the KYC. How do you assess your customer? How do you onboard them? So recently, the Central Bank of Malaysia, in fact, last year they've issued the guidelines for eKYC. I think beyond last year, eKYC guidelines, which many of the industry players are trying to embark on eKYC. Blockchain, I think, is one of the technology which has been predicted, which get more adoption in the recent years. So this is just an illustrative list of the things, but there's so many other things which we see currently getting disrupted, like the digital asset, digital custodian. These are some of the areas that are getting disrupted very heavily. And then if you look at
Hi, Mr. Gopal. Sorry, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now? Yes. So thanks. Sorry for the glitch. I've just changed from my headphones to the speakers because there's some battery drain. Apologies for that. So what I'm trying to see in the market is many of the countries are promoting digital financial services and innovation in fintech. Each of the country they are trying to innovate themselves in specific area. For example, Malaysia and Indonesia looking on Islamic way of doing new innovation, the Islamic fintech. Singapore are trying to do more on payments, wealth management. Thailand is trying to do more on payments, blockchain. Cambodia, we are hearing recently they are doing some innovation with respect to blockchain and payments. Philippines, I'm currently looking at digital banks. Malaysia recently done the digital banks, and so as Singapore and Hong Kong. So each of the country they are trying to position themselves of one specific area or some specific areas to make them visible in the region. And then I've also put in some of the active investors who are looking at in the region. So far, recently you might have heard like there is a SoftBank invested a few dollars in ADA, one of the marketing technology company in Malaysia. Yeah, if you look at Vietnam, many of the companies are investing in the wallets. So the space is getting very interesting with respect to fintech and the digital financial services. Specifically, if I have to talk to more about the finance and accounting kind of a spectrum or a cohort, where I see the innovation coming is mostly on the digital audit, both on the internal audit and the external audit. How do you use some of the emerging technologies to ease the way of doing audit? And then how we can increase the overall experience of doing the audit for some of the entities. So this is some of the new areas where we see the traction is happening. So, as I've mentioned, that payments and lending are some of the heavily disrupted areas in the fintech or the digital financial services. So, this slide gives a view of what I really mean on what is happening with respect to the payments advancement in the region. Like Singapore leads the race with respect to rest of the countries. But if you look at Malaysia here, you're seeing a very good digital payment transaction value. Thailand is also looking good. Singapore is the highest. Indonesia is the highest among because we all know if anything needs to be scaled, we need a large user base. That's where Indonesia come into picture. So as in Vietnam and Philippines. So the entire ASEAN is looking at payments kind of a revolution, so which is getting very interesting. That's why you see the many countries, the number of e-wallet players are getting more every other day we see. So coming to the Islamic fintech, I think if I don't touch the Islamic fintech and sitting in Malaysia, I think it doesn't resonate well. So I've just thought of giving some insights on what is happening with respect to the Islamic fintech space. So globally, if you look at the conventional versus the Islamic fintech landscape, the Islamic fintech players are less by count, around 150 plus kind of a players, uh, but we see there is an increasing number of magnitude of the Islamic fintech players that is coming in the region, specifically in the areas of personal finance management, trading, peer-to-peer lending. There are also like very good Islamic payment gateways, remittance players, forex players that are coming up locally and in the region, who build their solutions with respect to Sharia compliance and governance, follow all the Sharia practices in order to build their bespoke solutions. So this is getting very interesting. In fact, Malaysia wants to project themselves as a leader with respect to the Islamic digital banking. So far, I personally know around some 30 to 40 plus kind of an Islamic fintech players in Malaysia, but I hope this number will increase soon as we mature. So if you look at from an investment perspective, where we see there's a lot of traction happening, I think it's good for the young students for you to learn which are the prime areas where the disruption is happening. I think that this graph clearly indicates, as I've mentioned, payment. Around 42% of the investment is going in the payment companies. That's where a lot of hiring that is happening, new innovation, new technologies, new R&D that is coming up. That's the payments. And then the next is mentioned on the lending. These two occupy the most. If I count, it's around some close to 57 to 60% kind of a thing in that space. Insurance, insurtech, that is a new area. And then the whole with respect to the banking tech, which includes the reg tech, how to use technology for regulatory reporting, that is new area that is getting disrupted. Personal finance management, accounting tech, I think this is one of the area where there is some significant investment is happening. Like how do you use technology for the easing of doing the accounting exercise. So this is where some investment is happening. So other areas is more respect to fraud management and those kind of areas. And then if you look at where the investment is happening, I think no brainer. Singapore is the highest, followed by Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and the rest of the countries, even Malaysia. So I'm trying to give a picture of what is happening in the region, so you can be mindful of your aspirations in the region. So why many of them are investing in fintech solutions? If it could be a good interview question when you are aspiring for your career goals. So basically, it is to fintech helps to create new business models, like how when you work with different kind of alliance partners, different kind of a network, it will help you to create new business models. And then using digital, the cost to serve a customer is quite less, or cost to reach a customer or cost to acquire a customer is less when compared to your traditional branches or then ATMs or something. So that's why there is a specific interest from the banks and insurance companies to collaborate with the fintech and insurtech players. So this is to reduce transaction cost, and then to disrupt the delivery channels, like creating a two kind of a place. How do you reach with your traditional channels, like the banks, the front end, the agents, versus all the digital tools with respect to your mobile apps or your chatbots. So this is disrupting your delivery channels. And then how do you participate in this strategic race or the digital race? How do you prototype, learn these new things and put into your BAU practice? So these are some of the fundamental reasons why there is a lot of attention towards this fintech solutions. So looking at if some of you, if you are aspiring for your careers in banks or the fintech companies, as I've mentioned, the payments is one. And if you look at where the banks and the fintechs are collaborating in the region, it comes with the payments is the one. Next is the wealth management space, that is where the collaboration is happening, the lending, the blockchain, and personal financial management. So this is based on a survey we did with around some 350 banks globally. We collate this and we classify these banks as the digital champions or the digital smart followers, the adopters, the latecomers. So based on our analysis and interactions with this bank, we see the major handshake of between the banks and the fintech companies are surrounding at these areas, so which we need to be mindful. So I think in these days, if I don't talk of COVID, it's again some incomplete. There was a good reading I was doing a few days before. There was a line which says, "Never let a good pandemic go waste." So that's what it's clearly visible in this slide. The whole pandemic created a disruption in the whole digital way of doing things. So many of the banks globally, because of this pandemic situation, they've created new functions to beat or to belong to the new norm. Like there was an increase in 41% on increase in the limit of the contactless payment. Like some of you might have seen your parents or your elders or brothers or sisters using like contactless payments. So previously there are limits, like you can use only for 100 ringgit or 250 ringgit or 300 ringgit. But globally, the bar of this limit can be increased so that we can enable contactless kind of a payments. That is one. Many of the traditional banking processes have been moved towards the digital processes with onboarding, credit scoring. So those or application creation. And then many of the banks are looking at ID and access management systems. So this is getting very interesting. And then instead of moving directly walking to your branches, many of the global banks have adopted like appointment booking in the branches. So And these are some of the new things that are coming up. So and then the next one, which I think which you might be considering in the region that is coming up, there is a lot of fever for the digital banks that are coming up in the region. You can see that in Korea, UK, Australia, and now in the ASEAN markets, Hong Kong, um, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and also this could be an interesting angle for career aspirations. There are new ways of doing business. The digital and the neobanks, they focus on specific customer segments or personas, and then they try to embed new emerging technologies, the microservices or the cloud analytics, in order to reach the customers differently or achieve the cost efficiency. So this could be another interesting spectrum to look at how you can tune your career with respect to the needs of some of the digital banks that are coming up in the region. And then the last but not the least, I think in summary, I don't want to speak more. I would like to give an air time for some of the participants to ask me any questions. But in summary, I see the fintech is getting disrupted very heavily in the region. Just give me a minute. This fintech is getting disrupted very heavily in the region. We see a lot of potential for many of the emerging technologies to be adopted by the banks and financial services firms. And what we see from an industry perspective is there is a lot of lack of talent. And it's very difficult to find the right talent in the Malaysia and in the region who can do or who can serve some of the needs. So I feel there is a lot of requirement that might gonna come, knowing what the kind of investments that are going in digital in this region. So I sincerely wish all of you good luck in finding hope in finding the right career in the fintech, and hope I've been able to give some of the insights on what is happening in the fintech space in the region today. Thanks, Professor Nafis.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal. That was quite a lot of information in a very short period of time. And just to let audience inform that we will be doing some discussion based on the presentation of Mr. Gopal. So we will have a very focused Q&A dialogue between two of us. And then you can write your questions on the channels which you are connected with us, and we will pull up the question in the last 15 to 20 minutes. So going with the flow of the session, Mr. Gopal, you talked about technology a lot. I think technology was the key word in most of your discussion, impacting in fact every aspect of finance and accounting services. And technology is becoming the norm. You can't separate technology with finance or accounting. And because of that, there is a fear coming up in the fresh graduates or those who are pursuing accounting or finance specialism, thinking that there will be less job opportunities, or maybe they will be more replaced by the robots, and we will be looking into a society where robots will be taking up the jobs. So based on your experience and your work in the consulting firm, how relevant human role will be in the financial services for the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think that's a very good question. In fact, this is one of the common question I hear from the students when I interact with other universities in Australia and in the region as well. So I think my personal opinion, I think it's not a situation to get alarmed. So I think there's still a lot of role for a human to play in the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, beyond that. So what we see that is happening, for sure, there's a lot of automation happening. There's a lot of robotic kind of an exercise that is happening in the financial service space. But the real brain or decision making still lies with the human. I can take a couple of examples. Like for example, in a typical banking world, financing and accounting kind of a work, for example, doing a reconciliation, that's where the heavy mundane kind of a work, like check each and every cell, do a trial balance. So this is a kind of a repetitive work. So what is happening in the industry is all these repetitive kind of works have been automated, bringing in new bots or something. which I don't see as a threat, but there are new jobs that have been created with the advancement of the technology, where we need to find our relevance. For example, in order to train these bots, we need human. In order to make decisions on moving some digital fraud, we need to make decisions. If you need to do a digital audit, we need to have some competencies. So I think it's like it's a left hand right hand thing. Some of the repetitive tasks have been automated, but there are new things that have been created, new job opportunities. So definitely not an alarming situation, not to get afraid. But from what advice I can give to the students is to learn those new things which are required from the industry, where the ask is more from the industry with respect to some of these new things, in order to better equipped when they move out of the journey of the university journey. Yeah, you're on mute, Professor.
Thank you, Gopal. You have at least tried to remove some of the fear from the audience and the graduates who are pursuing the degree. Definitely, as you mentioned, technology is here to augment the role of the human here. It's not here to replace, and that's the difference we are looking in the graduates. Use technology to support their work, augment their work, and make them a better decision maker. There's another follow-up question on that. You have a huge amount of experience working with the global fortune, banking, financial services, insurance companies, not only in this region, but also in the USA, Europe, Middle East. When you are hiring fresh graduates to work into these areas of accounting, finance, and banking services, what are the skills you are looking, especially after the things have changed due to the fintech and the way digital finance is moving? So, what are the key skills you are looking into the fresh graduates?
So I think a very good question again. Currently, I'm doing a lot of recruitment for my teams, and in the region as well. In the past, I've recruited a lot of fresh grads. So what I precisely look in fresh grad when we try to hire is on 3 to 4 different skill sets. One, for sure, we won't expect the graduate who is coming who is onboarding. They are well versed with all this blockchain or AI or some of these technologies. This is something will be learned as a part of the job. But what we precisely look is, first thing is the your analytical skills. How analytical you are. What is your way of thinking, thought process, approach? So this is something we look at. That is the fundamental way. And then the second one is the communication skills. How best we will articulate. In fact, for some of the interviews I do with the fresh grad, I give them a topic, say, tell me, do some research on how technology is used in finance and accounting, or what are some of the use cases used in insurance industry. I give this as a topic to the fresh grads. And then I ask to present them during the interview I do with them. So what I really test in that interview is not about the content which they pull as a part of the presentation deck during the interview, but their approach of thinking, their market research abilities, and the way of presenting. I mean, we know it is not coming from an expert, but the whole approach we will look at in looking at the and the third important element, which is very much required for as a fresh grad or an experienced person who have lost a lot of hair in this whole journey, is the passion. How passionate the student with respect to learn, try new things, get their hands dirty in learning some of the new things. I think if I have to paraphrase, like attitude, analytic skills, communication skills, and your passion. So these are the key differentiating factors in order to onboard any new university grad.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that will instill some of the confidence in our audience and the graduates who are looking to work in the fund. It's always coming back to that, it's not only the subject matter expert, but also need to understand how does the organization work and what are the roles being played by every individual in that, keeping the theme of the topic today, Gopal, we talked about how the technology is going to shape, what are the skills they are looking at. Most of the business graduates as well as the finance and accounting graduate always have this dream of working in a big four, and consulting firm. And you have worked in EY, you are now working with Deloitte, and you have a huge decade long experience in digital banking, fintech, card and payments, mortgages, you name it, all the segments of the financial services. So can you share some of your experience working in the big four, and as your consulting journey, which can make the students passionate about looking for their dream job?
Sure. So thanks again. I think that makes me think from my university days. I have the pleasure to go to university a couple of times after joining the corporate. I took a break and went back to university for my foreign degree as well, international MBA. So what I really like about consulting is a few because of the few things. One, we get a chance to work on real problem statements of the industry and the market. For example, previously I was working on how do we promote cashless economy in a country. So this is something very real and nationalistic kind of an objective. Or one of the another project I was working is on how do we build a national eKYC database, and how do we leverage on this eKYC database to give incentives to the publics or individuals or help SME. So this is another interesting area I've looked at. Or help the corporates. For example, your corporate, your sales are increasing, your revenue is increasing, but you're not profitable. So we come across these kind of a problem statements. Some of the corporates come to us and say they have launched some very unique, creative, fancy kind of a products, but they are not getting the right traction in the market. So the customer acquisition is not there. So how do we approach them? So the key point I'm trying to say here is the kind of problem statements we work in consulting industry is quite vast, so that keep us really motivated. And the second thing, what I've seen in my consulting experience in the last decade of my experience is you'll get a chance to work with real intellect people. So they I mean, they really inspire in the way of how you look at things, how you perceive things. So that is another interesting aspect. And then the other objective and the other interesting aspect of consulting is you will deal with the C-suite, head of the departments, the board, very initial early of your career, which gives a lot of insights on how a board works, a board of a corporate works, what would the thinking of a C-level kind of a person, what do they really look at. So this will help to strengthen your abilities. And the fourth additional thing I look at is you'll get a chance to work in multi industries. Although in my career I was mostly around 70% focused on banking and financial services, around 30% I got a chance to work on airlines, I got a chance to work on the retail industry, I got a chance to work on telecom, oil and gas. So the diversity of the industry will come into place. So that's another unique opportunity. And then you get a chance to go on trips, on flights, on company pays you. So that's a different cat of, although not to say we are not a tourism company, but that's the side effects or the byproducts of the consulting industry.
Your last point really fascinated me, the perks of working in a big consulting firm. If I had an opportunity, I can't go back to the industry anymore, spending 17 years in the academia. But those are the things. But there's always I also hear, you did talk about the positives, Gopal, but I understand talking to you and friends like you that you also have sleepless nights when you have to work with your partners across the globe, and you have deadlines to meet. But I understand it's all the excitement of working with the big four, big consulting firm, and you have to juggle between the two. Taking a step back and looking into the area where we are moving forward. Technology is going to revamp how the work will be done. We'll be depending a lot of the system driven by machine learning, artificial intelligence outcome and all. And you have also worked in some of the RegTech consulting as well. So this is again a common fear which many people have, that when we are implementing AI solution and we are completely automating the system, what happens if something goes wrong, in terms of the pure automated system, AI solution, who will bear the responsibility, especially it's coming from the AI ethics perspective? Will it be the human who are using the system, or is the human who have designed the system, or we are going to prosecute the robot and put them in the jail?
So this is a very tricky question. I think you want me to put on a spot asking this question, Professor Nafis. But I think what we do as a best practice when someone is working on all these emerging technologies, be it AI and blockchain or whatever it is, the risk management comes in place at the first place. Whenever the idea is born, uh, have a different lens of risk management. So what we do in some of our clients when we help them, when you try to work on this, say, cloud, or when you work with AI, so we will ask them what kind of audit controls you have in place. How do you make sure this robot or the bot you have built is not behaving on its own? So what are the controls you have placed? What kind of logging you do? What kind of best practices you adopt? So these kind of things will help to make sure the damage is less. Sometimes what really happens is all these solutions once built, it is not like letting them run on their own. There needs to be a periodic check and balance of the complete health of these systems that is required. In fact, that's what we this been encouraged by in the sandbox as well. Like, what happens in a typical sandbox is, if you have a very creative idea and if you want to infuse the emerging technologies, so you have to go through a sandbox process to see if all the elements with respect to data security, data privacy, the bot behaving a super bot or a superman kind of a thing, all these cases will be evaluated in order to make sure it is healthy to release to the public or for the individuals, considering all the sensitivities with respect to data and all. But what I've seen significantly happening in the region is the mode of adopting these new technologies have been increased tremendously in the ASEAN region. Previously, there was when we try to push some of these new innovative things to the financial institutions, usually we hear back saying what will be the ROI, return on investments, or an ROE of my project with respect to these technologies. But we see the mood is being changing. Everyone realize if you don't reinvent ourselves, you will fall back in the race with respect to the competition, knowing some of these small young players are coming into the financial service space. So experimentation is the key. This is what I tell to many of my clients as well.
Great, Gopal. Thank you for your insight on that part. I will try to take up some of the questions from the audience now. Otherwise, we will never finish with this discussion. And there's a question from Meera, who is mentioning that, talking about the blockchain getting traction in the finance. If you are able to share your input on how soon we will have governance policies and standards on utilizing this tech, for instance, in the financial reporting. So blockchain being put into financial reporting.
Yeah, thanks for the good question. I think there are two technologies which are quite proved to be bullish for adoption in the financial services. One is the blockchain, and other is the AI. Specific to blockchain, I'm not talking about from Malaysia perspective or something, but from a global perspective, we are already seeing the governance policies, the standards of utilizing this blockchain and all coming from few regions, in few regions and countries. And then the experimentation has already been happening. For example, you might know of the project Ubin from Singapore. And then there is a whole new buzz of CBDCs, which is the central bank driven digital currencies that are coming up. And there's new standards and policies that are coming on the digital custody of how do you do the custody of digital assets, be it the security tokens or utility tokens. So that is another interesting area where the standards or policies. In fact, new licenses are being issued by the central banks in respect to all these areas pertaining to the financial reporting. I have not seen much traction from central banks with respect to bringing the right policy or governance using blockchain. But rest of the areas, I see we are picking up both from the conventional kind of a central banks and the offshore jurisdiction kind of a central banks. There's a lot of push coming for the adoption of blockchain technology.
Thank you for your input. So I think that's another area where we're looking into financial reporting, and some of the technology aspects will be implemented in the time to come. We have another question from Mr. Guna, and this is the flavor of the town right now. We have so much of buzz happening in the digital banking license being offered in Malaysia, and almost 29 applications have been received until the end of the year, with the big names like Sunway, Petronas, Axiata, you name it. So this is also a concern, and Mr. Guna has rightly put in that what is the with the bank, traditional bank will get obsolete, and if they not, how they can sustain their traditional business model. So what will be the future of traditional banks will look like, Gopal?
Sure, I think this is a very interesting question and the common question which we hear from clients. So we don't see the brick and mortar banks will die because of these new digital banks that are coming up. In the interim and the medium term, for sure, there is space for everyone. But what we see long term is we need to have innovation with respect to everything we do with the incumbent banks. Regarding this part on the traditional business model, they can still go with the traditional business model, but really need to look at how they can look at different customer segments. The approach needs to be changed. So what we see is the new digital banks that are coming. Hopefully they are five. I mean, BNM say up to 5 licenses. It could be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We don't know yet. But for sure there will be a lot of competition, and they all fight for the same kind of a customer base or the pool of customers. Although if you look at Malaysia market, the organic and inorganic growth, there's still organic and inorganic growth that is possible in the Malaysia digital banking or the whole banking, retail banking or an SME banking environment. But yes, the competition will be high. That's where in order for the incumbent banks to make them relevant or to stay ahead of the competition with these new digital banks that are coming up or the new fintech players, it is like looking at the new business models, targeting different customer segments, different industries, bring in the attribute of speed in everything you do. For example, SME today, if they apply for loan, it might take 1 day, 2 days, 10 weeks, you name it, 3 months, 1 year sometimes also. So the key proposition these digital banks are coming up is the speed. How do you use emerging technologies to give a loan in less than 2 days? How you do KYC in less than 2 seconds or 3 minutes or 5 minutes? There are a lot of benchmarkings across the globe. So unless you try these new ways, it will be very difficult to bring the experience to the customers and retain the customers. So at the end of the day, it falls behind what is the real customer experience we are giving to the customers, be it banking or an insurance space.
You have rightly pointed out, Mr. Gopal, that at the end of the day, we don't know who will be the loser, but definitely the customer will be winner in this digital banking space, and we as a customer will have more opportunities and more options available, and the industry will be providing more solution to us. Keeping the theme of the discussion on digital banking, there is a question from one of the audience, Ms. Hafina, asking that how it will impact the overall economy. We talked about from the customer and some of the players perspective, but overall impact of digital banking on the Malaysian economy.
So I see it would be a positive impact. For example, if I take the lens or a hat of a customer, so as a customer with this new digital banks come up, I will have options as a customer. Because digital banks are known in the world for offering attractive features like high deposit rate or the less lending rates, because they don't offer the brick and mortar kind of a banks. Their cost is less, so they would like to pass some of these incentives to customers by giving high interest rates for deposits and less for lending. So for sure there will be positive impacts. And then there would be more jobs that will be created, because there's a lot of headhunting happening in the market, because there are 29 players applying for a new license. They have to show fit and proper kind of people in order to put this license application for the digital bank. So there's a lot of headhunting happening. So for sure there will be jobs will be created in the market, both for the locals, or maybe they can bring the international talent, but the ratio we need to see how it evolves. Even I mean, if we take from a one step back, if we look at if this digital banks doesn't go well, what will happen to the economy? Say that's where I think I really appreciate how the central bank have put the guidelines. They have put a cap on the total asset size you can deal with the digital banks. So they have put around 3 billion as a cap in the foundational phase for the digital banks. Say worst case, if all the five digital banks doesn't go well or prosper, the damage you're creating is 15 billion or less. This is the worst case, super worst case kind of a scenario, which is a very less percentage to the overall banking kind of a asset we currently deal in Malaysia. So I really see this is a kind of a proof of concept kind of a thing for digital banks, and I don't see a big impacts which will tremendously change the economy uh, on the negative side. But I see a lot of positive things that will happen, because what it's enabling is new innovative models that are coming up with the consortiums that have been formed up, like a bank partnering with a telco, or a bank partnering with a cooperative. So interesting models that are coming up, so which is very good to see.
Yeah, definitely exciting time ahead, and we are looking forward for a more prospering Malaysian economy in 2022, where all the impact of COVID take a back step, and all this innovation, especially in the digital banking space, will take up. So we are looking forward to that. I understand we are coming closer to our closure of this session. So I again, just want to have a couple of closing discussion on the theme of what we talked about. We started with the talking about the graduates and the employment and the jobs in the financial services. I just want you to take down the memory lane, and imagine you are a fresh graduate in 2021, Gopal. I think you will feel happy that I'm putting you back into the early days of your life. How you would have started, because when you started, or when we started, we have very limited social media. We don't have LinkedIn, we don't have Facebook, and we don't have so much amount of resources available to us. So if you have to start as a fresh graduate in 2021 and working with the big four, how your path would have looked like differently compared to a decade or a decade and a half back?
Sure. So I think that's a very good question. It really took back to where I started. What I would do differently if I have to start from fresh is aim high in career. So what I felt when I started my career, I think I had a conservative view, or the background I come from was different. I never had high dreams. So maybe high dreams doesn't mean I'll become an astronaut or go into Mars or something, but becoming a strong leader or strong focus. So high dreams is something which I'll try to do. And then to make it more constructive, it's to go into the next level of how do we achieve these dreams. So what I see, and I encourage people to do, some of my interns or the fresh grads, is um, be creative, and then be open for work. So this was an interesting statement told to my ex-mentor when I was working in Europe. Is if people keep coming to your door and knocking you for help, then you're making an impact. So as long as you can create that kind of an environment where people will come and ask for you, then you're creating a space that you're known for something, and they really see a value in you. So that is something which I keep as a measure for myself inherently, to see if that is happening. So as long as that is happening, I feel I'm doing good. So this is something I will. So to paraphrase, two things: one is to aim high, and then constructively think how do you reach those heights you keep for yourself, and then be open to take tasks, and then to offer help. So that will really help in the long term. And then
Definitely.
the third, which I can think, is build network. So this is another thing which I really helped in the career, is your career will really depend upon how big is your network.
Definitely. And Gopal, I think in current time, it is much easier to aim to go to the Mars. You don't need to be an astronaut. You need to just have a socialpreneur or entrepreneur, and need to have a big amount of money. And if you know in your network Elon Musk and Richard Branson, then you have more opportunity to go to the Mars. That's more easier than getting a job in EY and Deloitte, I believe. Uh, parting thoughts, Gopal. I would have loved to have you physical, and because of this COVID, we have to do this session. But definitely, we are looking forward to have you one time in the campus at APU. The students will be excited to hear from you physically. But just on the closing thought, what advice you will give to our student who is going to graduate or looking for an internship especially in the financial services industry? Just a closing thought.
So I think there is a lot of opportunity in the digital financial services in Malaysia, specifically in the fintech area. You have around some 300 plus kind of fintech players in Malaysia. I personally know many of these CEOs who are still struggling to find the right talent. They're not looking for the complete experts of these things, but at least who can resonate with all of the things which are happening in the market. That itself is suffice. So I suggest be open with finding some of these right roles. Start using LinkedIn. I think the internships really help. I did a few internships when I was a student with Google and British Telecom. So that really helped me to understand how the corporate work, and then start writing some thought leadership articles or some articles on your own that will help you to bring visibility. Not necessarily these articles are Financial Times standards or some economic kind of standards, but if start putting some of your thoughts in pen and paper, showcase. That's a good thing. And then what I used to do when I was doing for job search as a graduate is try to reach the corporate, offering some help, share them some thought leadership or some market research. So it's like a give and take. So you offer them something where you can catch some attention to get an interview opportunity or an internship opportunity.
Thank you very much, Gopal, and we are very much honored to have you today. And we are also very privileged to have you as our industry advisor board member for the School of Accounting and Finance. And your insights are always good to improve our curriculum as well as what are the skills you are looking at. So we will look forward for more interactive session with you in the future. And thanks for sharing your thoughts and time with us. And have a good day ahead. And thanks to everyone who have joined us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Dr. Nafis. My pleasure. And thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.